At the end of the last video, I said I wanted to learn a little bit more about Meve, our card-slinging commander of Thronebreaker. I've run into a little bit of a conundrum though. As I should have figured, the vast majority of information out there on Meve comes from the Thronebreaker game itself. Where I've only played the very early stages of the game, most of Meve's pivotal moments are ahead of me. Now, I don't want to spoil myself too hard on the game, but I know that some of what I'll talk about here is territory covered in Thronebreaker, but this is not a comprehensive overview of Meve. I'll touch on where Meve came from, as well as a couple of events from the novels that intertwine with the Thronebreaker game. One thing I've read in a few places is that Meve's path in the books doesn't always line up compared to her path in the Thronebreaker game. I haven't read the Witcher books yet, though I have skimmed the sections with Meve. So I may get some context wrong, like wildly wrong, so feel free to call me out in the comments on my gigantic knowledge gaps. So anyway, here's what I've read. Meve was a princess of Lyria, a kingdom of the Northern Kingdoms. Not a very large kingdom to my understanding, but relatively powerful. Lyria's neighboring kingdoms include Rivia, over there to the west. Now I'm sure you've heard the name Rivia before. Our boy Geralt likes to call himself Geralt of Rivia, though it wasn't an earned title at first. More on that later though. Meve's distant cousin is Queen Calanthe of Cintra, noted badass and grandmother of Princess Cirilla. Here she is in the Netflix series, totally chewing the scenery. Calanthe and Meve were good buddies. At one point, when Calanthe wasn't falling over herself to find a husband, rumors popped up that she and Meve were a thing. Later on, Meve will play a role in trying to protect Ciri from pursuers that have all sorts of greedy intentions. Anyways, at some point, Princess Meve of Lyria marries King Reginald of Rivia, and the kingdoms are united. Reginald loves Meve and he respects her as queen, though I don't know how much of the respect is reciprocated. King Reginald is famously dumb as a post and has a habit of crawling into bed with all sorts of the women kicking around his court. Meve and Reginald have two sons, Willem and Anceus. Apparently they take after their father, as they're both pretty big dummies in their own regard. My understanding is that Willem's ambitions will figure into Thronebreaker pretty heavily. As far as I know, Meve and Reginald's rule together is uneventful. Meve touches on this in The Blood of Elves, the first of the Witcher novels. Here she is describing days at the castle.
Something always hung in the air. My husband would be contemplating how to get his hands on yet another maid of honor. The marshal would be working out how to start a war which would make him famous. The wizard would imagine he was king. The servants wouldn't feel like serving. The jester would be sad, gloomy, and excruciatingly dull. The dogs would howl with melancholy, and the cats sleep, careless of any mice that might be scuttling around on the table. Everyone was waiting for something.
These days of waiting for something don't last long, however, as Reginald suffers an untimely death. Well, I say untimely, but the truth is that I couldn't figure out how he died. Let's say he tripped over his shadow and he fell down the stairs. Anyway, he dies, and the question of leadership in Lyria and Rivia comes up. At the time of his death, Reginald's sons are too young to step up, so Meve takes the lead. This suits her allies in the north, as they figure she'll be easy to manipulate. It also suits Nilfgaard, as they figure the kingdom will be an easy target with her at the lead. They're both wrong though. Turns out that Queen Meve doesn't screw around. Nilfgaard, in case you're not familiar with the Witcher universe, is the big bad empire in the south that have been steamrolling northward and gobbling up kingdoms all over the place. Pretty much everything south of this river here, the Yaruga, is Nilfgaard territory. The Emperor of Nilfgaard, Emir Var Emrys, used to be a weird half-hedgehog monster, but don't worry about that right now. He's also hungry to spread the territory of the Empire. Oh yeah, and he's also the papa of Princess Ciri. Now Ciri is living with Grandma Calanthe in Cintra, but Emir sets his sight on the place and decides to take Cintra over. And as a bonus, he can scoop up Ciri at the same time. Nilfgaard rolls right over the forces of Cintra, but Ciri manages to slip away. Nilfgaard keeps pushing north, but they run into a hell of a roadblock at Sodden Hill, where a union of mages from the northern kingdoms manage to shut down the Empire's forces. So things chill out for a while, and Emir is forced to regroup. But he's not done looking for more territory, and he's not done looking for Ciri, and the leaders in the north know it. At Hag Castle, up here near the Pontar Valley, the leaders of the northern kingdoms hold a meeting to figure out how to deal with Nilfgaard. The events of the meeting here are covered in the Blood of Elves novel. Of those present, not everyone is convinced that Nilfgaard is an imminent threat. Others, Meve included, aren't interested in waiting around to see what happens next. Here's Vizimir II of Redania warning that it would be a mistake not to act.
When our ancestors landed on the beaches 500 years ago, the elves also hid their heads in the sand. We tore the country away from them piece by piece, and they retreated, thinking all the while that this would be the last border, that we would encroach no further. Let us be wiser, because now it is our turn. Now we are the elves. Nilfgaard is at the Yaruga and I hear, so let them stay there. I hear. They won't come any further, but they will, you'll see. So I repeat, let us not make the same mistake as the elves.
Meve agrees, and she adds her own caution.
Let us say that they do not cross the Yaruga. Let us say that Nilfgaard will simply wait. Now let us consider, who would that suit, them or us? Who can let themselves wait and do nothing, and who can't?
Thinking back on those days with Reginald, back when everybody was waiting for something, as she put it, Meve gets the same feeling now. She goes on to say,
Nilfgaard is observing us. Something is hanging in the air. Silly thoughts are springing up in many heads. So let us show them what we are really capable of. Let us show them who is really king here.
The conversation turns to Ciri, and those at the meeting know that the young princess of Sintra is a political asset, as gutted as the place may now be. They know it's important to find and protect Ciri, or maybe use her for their own advantage. Meve suggests that King Falstad of Temeria, one of the meeting goers, is looking to find and marry Ciri for political gain. He denies this, of course. Others believe that Emperor Emhyr of Nilfgaard is doing the same. Now I'm going to take a really brave stance here and suggest that maybe you shouldn't endeavor to marry your own daughter, but what do I know? Whatever the reason Emhyr has for finding Princess Ciri, it's probably not great for the Northern Kingdoms. At one point, it suggested that maybe Ciri should be eliminated, but Meve isn't having it.
Infanticide? An ugly solution, my kings. Unworthy. And surely unnecessarily drastic. First of all, let us find the girl, because we still don't have her. And when we have found her, give her to me. I'll keep her in some castle in the mountains for a couple years and marry her off to one of my knights.
And this here is the kicking off point for Thronebreaker. In fact, one of the first scenes in the game is a shot of the meeting goers at Castle Hag. Meve runs into Count Caldwell on her way home, and she seems to be relieved that the meeting is over and she can return home. Well, I guess we'll see how that goes. So beyond this point in the timeline, I haven't done a lot of research into what happens with Meve. I want the chance to experience it as it's told in Thronebreaker. But we can't ignore what happens when Geralt and Meve cross paths in the books. Before that though, we do get a hint of how things are going for Meve. In the book Times of Contempt, Geralt is out doing Geralt things and runs into his pal, the bard Dandelion, who briefs on how things are going for the North. He tells Geralt,
After the surrender of Rivia, the Nilfgaardian army continued to the north. They almost did not face any resistance. Demavend and Meve were pulling their soldiers back because they could not create a line and begin the decisive battle. So, the Nilfgaardians got to Aldersburg. To prevent a blockade, Demavend and Meve decided to go to battle. The formation of their armies wasn't the best.
But a scene in the third novel, Baptism of Fire, is where Meve and Geralt first meet, so I have to at least mention it. During the events of the book, Geralt learns that Emperor Emhyr has Ciri and plans to marry her, the totally normal way that dudes sometimes marry their own daughters. Now I believe this is actually an imposter and not the real Ciri. Either way, Geralt doesn't know this, so he sets out south to go rescue her, with a small party accompanying him. Through a bit of bad advice, Geralt ends up crossing the Yaruga on his way south, smack in the middle of a battle between the encroaching Nilfgaard and Meve's army. Nilfgaard is once again creaming the northern forces, who are pulling back because they can't hold the line. Geralt manages to accidentally piss off the northern troops by messing up their means of retreat. Not intentionally, he has no idea what's going on. In the chaos of the battle, though, Geralt rallies some of the fleeing warriors and helps push back the Nilfgaardian forces, temporarily anyway. When the smoke clears and Geralt is piecing together what happened, Meve finds Geralt. She now has a big slash on her face and teeth missing. She's spitting blood and having a hard time speaking clearly. When the fighting started, Meve was in the front line along with her troops. The scar that Meve earned in this battle is prominent in a lot of the artwork of the Queen. It's a pretty clear message to anyone facing her that she doesn't mess around. Meve asks for Geralt's name, but instead of answering Geralt of Rivia, as he usually does, he answers Geralt of Nowhere. Up to this point, he was claiming Rivia because the title sounded more impressive that way. It wasn't his to claim though, and he knows it. Meve doesn't know what he's been calling himself though, so through some goofy irony, she asks Geralt to kneel, and she says the following.
You held the bridge together with the soldiers of Rivia, valiant Geralt of Nowhere. thus this honor. Well, it gives me great privilege to knight Geralt of Rivia.
So there you go. Geralt of Rivia now is that blue verified checkmark next to his name. I know this battle is one that I'll get to play in Thronebreaker, and I can't wait to see how the scene is handled. And I know Meve does factor into later books as well, but that's where I stopped researching. I'd rather learn the rest through the game. Well, for me, more accurately, a lot of the game will go over my head and I'll have to go watch some video to catch up. Kinda like this one. Meve does get mentioned in the Witcher games. I've only played the third one though, and one of her sons is in a scene from The Witcher 3. I had no idea who he was when I played it though. She is also one of the leaders in the PvP Gwent card game. I've played very little of that version of Gwent, but I'm going to give it a whirl before this video series is over. The mechanics are very close to Thronebreaker rather than the Witcher 3 version of Gwent. Look forward to some footage of me getting stomped down the road. One more tidbit I learned is that Meve will play a role in Season 2 of the Netflix Witcher adaptation. Scottish actress Rebecca Hansen will play the Queen. Here she is on the Amazon show Lore. This is the only episode I've seen of Lore, and it was pretty bad. But not because of Miss Hansen. I'm looking forward to see how she does as Meve. Well, I hope this video was interesting for you, if you're a noob to the Witcher universe like I am. I pulled a lot of information for this video from the Witcher Wiki, which is incredibly in-depth on all things Witcher. I also watched a couple of great videos, one from the channel called Proper Bird, and another by a channel called Yavinius. Both were really well researched and presented, and I encourage you to go check them out. Let me know if you like this video by commenting and hitting the like button, and let me know if you'd like to see more in the same vein. This video uses clips from the Netflix Witcher series, from the Witcher 3 game, and of course Thronebreaker. A lot of the art is pulled from Gwent, the Witcher card game, along with illustrations from the Witcher novels, and maps pulled from the Witcher wiki. Big thanks to my friends Sunclutch and Basic Bond for voicing Vizimir and Dandelion, and to my wife for voicing Meve. Next episode we'll get back to gameplay. I'll see you then.